I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in, and for a moment, I just sat there. The familiar sight of the place made my stomach tighten. Half nostalgia, half dread. It looked the same, but the silence was thick, like something was off. I didn't hear any chatter, no kids running around, no dogs barking. It was like everyone had disappeared, leaving behind only the echoes of what used to be. When I stepped inside, the house was even quieter. The air smelled a little stale, the kind of dust that accumulates when things have been left alone for too long. The living room was dark, the blinds still pulled shut. My eyes drifted to the worn recliner where Greg sat, motionless, looking like he was holding court in the middle of a ghost town. His sharp eyes, still too alert for a man his age, followed me as I stepped in. He didn't say anything at first, just stared, like he was waiting for something. And that's when I saw the note on the coffee table. It was from Emily. I read it twice, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. "Daniel, we are going for the weekend with my ex-husband and children. You'll be fine with Greg. Don't worry, it's just a couple of days. Love, Emily." I read it again, and my stomach dropped. My wife, Emily, was off having some family bonding time with her ex, and I was supposed to be here with Greg? I don't know why I was surprised. The cracks in our marriage had been there for years, but this felt like a gut punch. I called Emily, once, twice, 3 times. No answer. I tried again and again. Nothing. Greg just sat there, his eyes locked on me like he could see right through my confusion. Finally he spoke, his voice low but certain. "Well then, shall we begin?" I wasn't sure what he meant, but I didn't want to know, not yet. Still, I found myself nodding, walking over to the couch and sitting down. Something about the way Greg was looking at me made it clear that whatever was coming next, I wasn't going to like it. But for now, I had no choice but to stick around and figure out what the hell was going on. I sank into the old couch, feeling the cushions give way in all the wrong places, like they were sagging under some invisible weight. Greg didn't move, just stayed in that chair, eyes still locked on me, waiting for something. I shifted uncomfortably, trying to find some footing in a situation that felt more surreal by the second. I started, the words thick in my mouth. "Why are you here, Greg? I mean, where's everyone else? Emily, my mom, the kids?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just sighed, a slow exhale that almost seemed to say he was too tired for this. "Does it matter, Daniel? Emily's off on a weekend trip. Nothing new. And as for the rest of them, well, they've made it clear what they think of me." The sharpness in his voice wasn't lost on me. He sounded like someone who had been carrying a load for far too long. And yet, the way he said it, like it was all just another day, had me on edge. Why wasn't he more upset about being abandoned? Shouldn't he be angry or at least hurt? I ran a hand over my face, trying to shake the confusion. "It's just weird, man. They couldn't even tell me themselves. I didn't even know this was happening." "Like I said," Greg muttered, "it's nothing new. You've been living in the fog so long, you wouldn't notice the way they've been pulling the strings." I froze. The words hit me harder than I expected. "What are you talking about?" Greg's eyes, sharp as ever, finally shifted off me and toward the window, like he was seeing something only he could. "You don't think it's strange, do you? How everything always revolves around Emily's family, how they've got you chasing your tail, always thinking you're the one in control." My pulse quickened, and I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. "What the hell do you mean by that?" He glanced back at me then, his eyes too knowing for comfort. "I mean, they've been using you, Daniel, and you've let them. For years. You never asked where the money was going, or why Emily seemed more distant every time you tried to talk. But you've been busy, haven't you? Too busy being the good husband, the good son-in-law, to notice." I clenched my fists, the air between us thickening with tension. I could feel the pieces of my life shifting, crumbling just a little bit more. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but something in his voice, something in the way he said it, made me second-guess everything. Greg leaned back in his chair, stretching his legs out in front of him. "Look around you, Daniel. This place. You thought it was normal? The peeling paint, the broken appliances, the stuff that's never fixed. This house has been in disrepair for years. It was a sign, a big one, and you missed it. All for her. All for them." I hadn't wanted to notice. I didn't want to admit that the house had started to feel like a reflection of my life. Old, worn out, neglected. I could feel a knot forming in my stomach, tight and painful. My marriage with Emily hadn't been right for a while now, but I'd ignored it, thinking I could fix things, that maybe a few more dinners or more quiet patience would make it better. But looking at the house now, it felt like I'd been blind. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, voice quieter than I intended. "What's your angle?" Greg's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "My angle? I'm just the guy sitting in the chair, watching the show. But you've got more to figure out than you think. You've been played, Daniel, and maybe it's time you woke up." His words landed in the silence, making my skin crawl. I wanted to believe he was just bitter, maybe a little crazy, but the truth was sitting right there in front of me. The truth was that I had been so wrapped up in trying to make everything work, trying to hold on to the family image, that I'd missed all the signs. The signs that my wife, my family, had been pulling away, using me, making me think I was the one at fault for everything that went wrong. I swallowed hard, looking around the room again. The same old furniture, the same old pictures on the wall, everything felt suddenly hollow. "You really think Emily's been manipulating me?" Greg's grin was slow, calculating. "Not just her, all of them. They've been doing it for years, Daniel. And you've been their perfect little puppet, too busy being the good guy to see it." I stared at Greg, my thoughts spinning. Was it true? Had I really been this blind? Maybe this weekend wasn't just about leaving me with Greg. Maybe it was something more, something bigger than I was ready to face. The silence hung between us like a weight. I couldn't shake what Greg had said. It was like a door had opened, and now I was seeing everything in a harsh light I wasn't ready for. I pulled out my phone, hoping to distract myself, maybe find something that made sense of all this. I swiped through the messages, but then my thumb paused on Instagram. It was a photo from Emily's ex-husband, Scott. I hadn't talked to him in years, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen a post from him. But this one stopped me cold. There she was, Emily, sitting on a beach with Scott's mom, both of them holding cocktails, the ocean sparkling behind them. The caption read, "New beginnings, relaxing getaway with the family." The words burned into my brain, each one a reminder of how much I had ignored. I stared at the picture for a long moment, feeling the world tilt sideways. Emily, my wife, was on a getaway with her ex. Not just any getaway, but one where she was clearly cozying up with the family I should have been a part of. The family she'd left me to deal with Greg. I swallowed hard, fighting the rising heat in my chest. The last few years, the way things had been slipping. This was it. This was the final slap in the face. They were together, enjoying their life, while I was stuck here, abandoned, left with a man who just revealed everything I had been too blind to see. I glanced up at Greg, my stomach in knots. He wasn't looking at me, but I knew he saw my reaction. He didn't have to say anything. I could tell. His eyes were cold, watching me as if I was the one who was blind to the truth. "Yeah," Greg muttered after a long pause, as if he'd been waiting for me to get it. "You didn't think that was odd, did you? Emily spending more and more time with Scott? Not the kind of family time you should be having, not the way things should be." I could feel the anger welling up, mixing with the confusion. "What the hell is going on, Greg?" I snapped. "Why didn't you say anything before? Why didn't you warn me?" Greg tilted his head, like my frustration didn't even faze him. "Warn you? About what? You've been a good soldier, Daniel. Doing your best, but that doesn't change what's been happening. Emily? She's been checking out for a long time, and you've let it happen." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words caught in my throat. He was right, wasn't he? Emily had been slipping away. I'd noticed the distance, the late nights at work, the cold silences between us. But I had always told myself it was just a phase, a rough patch. But this was bigger than just a phase. The thing that pissed me off the most was how Greg spoke about it, like he knew all along and just let it happen. "You've been complicit in this too," I shot back, feeling the heat rise in my chest again. "You've seen it all, and you never said a damn thing." Greg didn't flinch. He just gave me that tired, almost bored look. Complicit? Maybe. But what good would it have done, Daniel? To open your eyes when you weren't ready to see the truth? He leaned forward slightly, voice turning low, almost mocking. "The truth is, you've been played, and they're laughing behind your back. I clenched my fists, anger bubbling to the surface. You could have warned me. You could have said something. Greg shrugged, his posture lazy, like he was done with this conversation before it even started. They've been doing this for years. It's nothing new. I'm not here to offer sympathy, Daniel. I'm here to watch you finally wake up. I wanted to yell, wanted to throw something, but there was a part of me that just couldn't. What he said, the way he said it, cut too deep. It was like he was exposing me, making me see the fool I'd been, and I couldn't escape it. I could feel the cold reality seeping into my bones, the sting of betrayal too much to ignore anymore. Why? I asked, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. Why tell me all this now? What do you want me to do about it? Greg didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, his eyes searching, maybe seeing more than I realized. Finally, he said, maybe you'll finally do something about it. Maybe you'll stop being their punching bag. Who knows? His words stung like salt in a wound. And then, for the first time, I started to wonder if this weekend wasn't just about me babysitting Greg. Maybe this was the start of something else. Maybe I'd been left behind for a reason, so I could see everything for what it really was. The air in the room felt heavier as I sat there, staring at my phone. My mind was buzzing, trying to catch up with everything Greg had just dropped on me. The photo of Emily, the history of manipulation, all the things I'd ignored. I needed something to ground me, something that made sense, so I pulled up the banking app. I could feel my heart rate picking up as the screen loaded. There it was in black and white, $10,000, withdrawn, just gone. I blinked at the number, my mind struggling to wrap around it. That wasn't just some random charge. That was our future. The money Emily and I had been saving for a house, the one dream we both shared. And now, it was gone. I scrolled through the transaction history, trying to make sense of it, but the more I looked, the worse it got. Withdrawals for vacations and emergencies, things that didn't make sense, things that didn't add up. I swallowed, a sick feeling spreading through my stomach. This wasn't just Emily. It wasn't just neglect. This was planned, systematic, a lie. My hands started to shake as I stared at the screen, trying to find something that made it all right. But it wasn't right. It couldn't be. I looked up at Greg, the weight of everything crashing over me. He saw it in my eyes. He knew exactly what I was seeing. Is this what you meant? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, still trying to process the horror of it. Is this what you meant when you said they were using me? Greg leaned back in his chair, eyes cold, like he'd been expecting this moment all along. Yeah, you've been paying for their fun for years. Every trip, every emergency. They always needed more, and you've always been the one to foot the bill. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My head felt light, like I might pass out. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything. But this was supposed to be for our house, Greg, for our future. He nodded slowly, as if this was nothing new. Yeah, and they knew that. They knew you'd keep saying yes, and every time they needed something, you'd hand over the money. Hell, even Emily's mom knew how to get to you. She'd call up, make it sound like an emergency, and you'd never question it. You'd never say no. I felt sick, physically sick. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to punch the walls, but instead, I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen in my hand like it was going to offer me some kind of answer. But there were no answers here, only betrayal. Greg watched me, that same calm expression on his face. You never thought it was odd that they always needed more, that their emergencies were always the same. You never stopped to ask why it was always you footing the bill. I gritted my teeth, trying to hold it together. I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to be a good husband, a good son-in-law. Greg scoffed, shaking his head slowly. Being the good guy doesn't get you anything, Daniel. You've been their ATM, their fall guy. They've used you up, and when they're done, they'll leave you behind, just like they've left me. The realization hit me hard, like a brick falling out of the sky. This wasn't just about neglect. This wasn't just about Emily being distant. This was a pattern, a scheme, and I'd been played every step of the way. I looked down at the phone in my hand again, the number taunting me. $10,000. Gone. Just like that. I clenched my jaw, trying to shove down the anger rising in my chest. I couldn't sit here forever, feeling sorry for myself. I had to do something. I looked up at Greg, meeting his eyes. I'm going to figure out exactly how far this goes. I'm going to confront Emily. I'm not letting her get away with this. Greg just nodded, his face unreadable. Do what you need to do, but don't expect her to come clean easily. She's been lying to you for a long time, and when she realizes you figured it out, well, you'll see her true colors. I nodded, the weight of what he was saying sinking in. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was about me taking control, about taking back what had been taken from me. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. It was time to fight back, to make them see that I wasn't as blind as they thought. I'll find out everything, I muttered, more to myself than to Greg. And when I do, I'll make her face it. Greg didn't reply. He didn't need to. He'd said enough. The path was clear now, and as sick as I felt, as angry as I was, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. I was going to take control of my life, one way or another, and it started now. I didn't even realize I was dialing until the phone was already ringing. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding like I'd just run a mile. It was ringing too long. Then, "Yo, Daniel?" Mark's voice came through, sharp and alert. "What's going on, man? You good?" I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Not really. I need to talk." He didn't hesitate. "Say the word. I'll head over." "No," I said too fast, then softer. "Not yet. I need to figure some stuff out first." Mark paused like he could feel how off I was even through the phone. "All right. You sound like hell, though. Where are you?" "At my mom's place. Long story." I rubbed my temple, eyes locked on Greg, who hadn't moved from his damn recliner. Emily dumped me here to look after Greg while she and her ex playhouse by the ocean. There was a silence on the line, then, "The hell are you talking about?" "I'm serious," I said. "She's with Scott. I saw the pictures. 10 grand gone from our account. I don't even know how deep it goes yet." Mark let out a long whistle. "Jesus, Daniel, I knew things were rough, but that's next level. You sure you don't want backup?" "Not yet," I said again. "I need to dig. I need to know what I'm actually standing on before I start swinging." "All right," he said finally. "But if anything feels off, you call me. Don't try to fix this crap on your own." I ended the call, slipped the phone into my pocket, and got to work. I started with the finances, pulled out my laptop from my backpack and opened our joint account. Then another spreadsheet. I listed every withdrawal Greg had hinted at, every vague emergency, every odd vacation that Emily insisted was a gift or non-refundable. There were patterns, always around the same time of year, always followed by a dry spell where she acted stressed and tired, just enough guilt to make me stop asking questions. Greg didn't say anything. He just watched me from across the room, sipping whatever was in his mug like this was some kind of show. I didn't want to ask, but something was nagging at me. "Greg," I said, eyes still on the screen. "How long have they been doing this? Be honest." He snorted. "Since before you were married. Emily learned it from her mom. Take what they want. Leave someone else holding the bag." "You sound like you've been on the receiving end too." He didn't answer, just stared at me with that same unreadable expression. I pushed back from the table and stood. "I need a break." The bathroom down the hall smelled stale, like damp towels and unused soap. I opened the cabinet above the sink, half out of habit, half from suspicion. Expired meds, some over a year past due, prescriptions with labels peeled off, a few pill bottles with Greg's name, but empty. I dug deeper. In the drawer beneath the sink were appointment reminders, half of them scratched out. A voicemail played when I opened his phone's call log. It was from his doctor's office, reminding him about an appointment that never happened. I turned, walked back into the living room, and stared at Greg. "What is this?" He looked up, not surprised. "What do you think it is?" "You're not getting treatment," I said flatly. "You've been skipping appointments," Greg shrugged. "Can't skip what no one ever plans to take you to." It hit me then, harder than the money. They hadn't just used me, they'd left him to rot. Emily, her mom, even my own damn mother. All of them had left Greg alone, sick, in a house falling apart. They took the money and ran, pretending they were still one big happy family. "You could have told someone," I said. "I could have," he said, "but no one would have listened. Now, maybe you will." I sat back down, brain spinning. My fingers were still on the keyboard, but I wasn't looking at the screen anymore. Something was forming. Not just rage, not just revenge, a plan. If Greg had been documenting things, if he had proof and I had the rest, we could show the truth, not just to each other, to everyone. I turned to him, suddenly seeing him in a different light. You said they've done this for years. You've been watching, keeping track. Greg nodded once. More than you know. Then he smiled, not smug, not cruel, just tired, like someone who'd been waiting for this moment longer than I could guess. And that's when I knew. This weekend wasn't an accident. It was the start of something. The weekend dragged on in a blur of quiet tension. I spent the next few days digging through Greg's stuff, cataloging everything I found. It wasn't just financial records and bank statements. Those were bad enough, but medical files, letters, and documents that had been hidden away for years. Every new thing I uncovered felt like another weight lifting off my shoulders, and at the same time, the heavier it all became. It started small, a few accounts in his name that I'd never known about, not just savings, real estate investments, offshore accounts, things that didn't add up with what he'd been telling me about his finances. At first I thought I was just stumbling onto his hidden money, something he'd squirreled away over the years, but then I found the stack of legal papers tucked into a drawer in the back of his closet. It was there, his real will, the one he'd kept from everyone, including Emily. I sat on the floor, the papers spread out in front of me, feeling like I was opening something that had been sealed in time. Greg walked in, his footsteps slow but deliberate. I looked up at him, unsure if I should ask, but his eyes met mine, and he gave a small, almost grim smile. You found it, he said, sitting down across from me. I've been waiting for you to see that. I flipped through the pages, trying to process the words. You're leaving everything to me? Everything, Greg said, his voice low. Emily and her family, they don't deserve a dime. They've drained me for years, the money, the time, the care, and in the end, they'd let me die alone. I closed the folder, trying to get my bearings. I was shaking, but I wasn't sure if it was from the anger or the realization that I was now tied to this in a way I hadn't expected. Greg had been planning this for months, no, years. He'd been gathering evidence, watching everything fall apart, and now he was asking me to help him take it all down. You've been planning this? I asked, my voice a little too rough. This isn't some sudden thing. You've had a plan for a while. Greg nodded. I've been preparing for it. The neglect, the lies. I knew it would get to this point eventually. Emily and her mother, they didn't even care enough to check on me. They just took what they wanted and left. I'm not going down like that. I felt a twist in my gut. There was so much I didn't know about Greg, so much he'd kept hidden. He wasn't just some old man stuck in a recliner. He'd been playing a longer game than I had, and now I was in it too. He slid the legal papers across the floor toward me. I need your help. You're the only one left who can do it. I stared at the papers, my heart pounding. You want me to go against Emily, my wife, my family. Your real family, he corrected. They've used you, letting them get away with it. That's your choice. But if you want to make sure they never do this to anyone again, you've got to stand up to them. And you can't do it alone. I wanted to argue. I wanted to shout that this wasn't my fight, that I had no place in all of this. But the truth was, everything he said felt too damn close to the truth. Emily and her family hadn't just neglected Greg. They'd used me. And now I was stuck between two realities. One where I kept pretending everything was fine, or one where I actually did something about it. What happens if I help you? I asked, voice quieter than I meant it to be. Greg's eyes held mine, steady. We make them face what they've done, the lies, the manipulation. You help me take them down, and I'll make sure they never touch a cent of what's mine, or yours. They'll answer for everything. I ran a hand over my face. My mind was spinning. I couldn't deny the part of me that was angry, that wanted revenge for all the ways Emily's family had treated me. But I couldn't help but think about Emily, about the years I'd spent with her, the promises we'd made. I wasn't sure I could turn my back on that so easily. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something else. If I didn't help Greg now, I'd be giving up my future too. I'd be letting them keep draining me, letting them keep using me for their own gain. This was my chance to stop it. I picked up the papers, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. All right, I said, my voice steady now. Let's do it. Greg nodded, his face finally softening just a little. Good. We document everything, every piece of evidence, every lie, and when the time comes, we show them what they've done. You'll be the one they least expect, Daniel. But You'll be the one who takes it all down. I didn't know what this would cost me, how it would change everything, but I couldn't back out now. I wasn't just fighting for Greg anymore. I was fighting for my own future, and I was done being their fool. The plan felt like something out of a bad movie, but I couldn't stop myself from going along with it. There was no turning back now. I stood there in Greg's living room, staring at the medical equipment we'd pulled together. An oxygen tank, IV drip, the fake monitors that beeped in a rhythm I could barely stomach. Greg had been clear. If we were going to make Emily and her family believe that Greg's condition was worse than it was, we had to set the stage perfectly. I don't like this, I said, glancing around the room. The space looked like something from a hospital ward, the sterile smell of disinfectant hanging in the air. The setup was too convincing. It made my stomach churn just looking at it. Greg was standing near the window, looking out into the backyard like he had all the time in the world. He didn't share my unease. You don't have to like it, he said, voice calm, detached. You just have to sell it. If they believe he's on his last legs, they'll come running. And when they do, we'll be ready. I didn't like the idea of manipulating their guilt like this, but Greg was right. This was the only way to get them back here, get them to stop ignoring him, stop taking advantage of him. If this was what it took to get them to face their neglect, then I'd do it. I'm good with the fake medical records, I said, eyeing the stack of paperwork on the kitchen counter. I can make everything look legit. Use some design software, throw in some signatures, some official-looking dates. But you're going to have to sell it, Greg. If you can't make them believe you're really sick, it'll all fall apart. Greg gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. I've been practicing, he said, tapping his chest with one hand. I'll play the part. You just focus on the details. Keep everything in order. Dates, symptoms, treatments. If we're lucky, they'll bite. And when they do, we're not letting go. There was something in his voice, something that made me feel like I was the one being pulled into a trap. The whole thing felt dangerous, like we were pushing the edge of a cliff, but I couldn't back out. Not now. Too much was at stake. We spent the rest of the evening setting up the room, making sure every detail was perfect. Greg insisted on having his medications lined up on the nightstand, even though he wasn't really taking them. I spent hours designing fake medical logs, drawing up charts with his supposed vitals and progress notes. Every page I printed felt like I was sinking deeper into this web of deceit. By the time we were finished, the house felt eerily quiet. Greg was lying in the bed, hooked up to the fake IV, staring up at the ceiling like he didn't have a care in the world. I glanced at him, wondering what he was thinking. This whole charade was his idea, but something in the way he'd set it all up made me wonder if he was starting to enjoy it too much. You ready for this? I asked, standing by the door, watching the clock tick toward the evening. Greg turned his head slowly, a small smirk curling at the corners of his lips. It's not about being ready, Daniel. It's about making them ready. They're going to walk in here, expecting a dying man. What they won't expect is that everything's already been arranged. You just make sure they don't see through the act. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was ready for any of this. I'd never played the part of a concerned caregiver before, but I knew I had to sell it. I couldn't let anything slip. If Emily and her family walked in here and suspected something was off, it would all come crashing down. Greg could see the hesitation in my eyes. You're going to have to act like it's the hardest thing in the world. Make them believe that you're the only one keeping me alive. They'll feel guilty. They'll blame themselves. They should. I swallowed hard, trying to wrap my head around what Greg was saying. You really think they'll feel guilty? Guilt is a powerful thing, Greg said. It'll get them to do what we need them to. And when it's all over, they'll have no choice but to face what they've done. We'll make them answer for the years of lies and neglect. I wasn't so sure about the guilt part. Emily had always been good at avoiding responsibility, and I wasn't sure I could make her feel the weight of all her actions. But I had to try. I had no other choice. We spent a few more minutes rehearsing how I was supposed to act when they walked in, how I'd need to exaggerate every detail of Greg's supposed decline. The more desperate you look, the better, Greg said, his voice more serious now. You're not just playing a role, you're showing them everything they've avoided. I nodded, though my gut was telling me that this wasn't going to go the way we planned, but there was no backing down now. I had to stick to the script. As the time ticked closer, I could feel the tension building in my chest. Everything had been set up. The stage was ready. I was ready. Or at least, I thought I was. And when Emily and her family walked through that door, it would be the moment everything changed, whether I was ready or not. The door creaked open, and I could hear them before I saw them. Laughter, chatter, the sound of feet dragging along the floor. Emily's voice cut through the noise, and my stomach twisted. I felt a moment of hesitation, a brief flash of doubt. This was it. The moment everything changed. They walked in, looking like they were expecting a sad, dying man. A weak old man lying in a bed, desperate for some last-minute sympathy. But instead, they found me, standing there, in the middle of a room that was dressed up like a hospital ward. The IVs, the monitors, the empty oxygen tank, all the details we'd painstakingly set up. And there was Greg, lying motionless in the bed, his breathing shallow, his face pale like it had been painted that way. I could see the confusion in their eyes first, then the shock. Emily, in her sundress, looked like she was bracing herself for the worst, her lips pressed tight. Her brother, Peter, stood behind her, fidgeting nervously. Her mother, Jane, was the first to speak, her voice sharp with concern. "Oh my God, Greg, we didn't know it was this bad." They'd walked into our trap, and as they tried to process the scene, I stepped forward, my voice steady, but harder than I intended. "I'm glad you could make it," I said, locking eyes with Emily. "But you should have been here long before now." There was a beat of stunned silence before Emily took a step forward, her expression flitting between guilt and deflection. "Daniel, what's going on? Why didn't you tell us things had gotten this bad? We've been busy. Busy?" I interrupted, my voice rising without meaning to. "You've been vacationing and leaving me to deal with everything. You've been leaving Greg to rot." Her face hardened, and she opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her a chance. I moved to the table where Greg's final letter lay, carefully folded, the ink barely dry. I pulled it out, holding it up in front of them like a shield. "This is Greg's final letter," I said, voice tight. "It's a letter that details everything you and your family have put him through over the years. The neglect, the lies, the constant taking without ever giving a damn about how he was doing. It's all here." I began reading aloud, my eyes skimming the words I'd never thought I'd read. I could feel Emily's eyes on me, desperate to stop me, but I couldn't. I wouldn't stop now. "To my daughter and her family, I have spent my last years trying to hold on to the lie you've all built, that I was cared for, that my needs were met, that I wasn't just a source of money and convenience. But I am no fool. I know how little I meant to you all, how you used me, how you let me fall apart while you went off and lived your lives. Emily, you have been the greatest disappointment of all. I thought you would be different, but you've shown me just how little you care. This is my final gift to you, proof of what you've done." I let the letter fall into silence, the words hanging in the air. I glanced up, and I could see the horror in Emily's eyes. Her mother's face was flushed with embarrassment, and Peter was shifting on his feet, looking like he wished he could disappear. But none of them said anything, not at first. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice a mix of defensiveness and guilt. "Daniel, I don't know what you think this proves, but you don't understand. We've been dealing with so much lately. I've had to keep everything together and—" "Keep everything together?" I barked, stepping forward. "By running off to some beach house with your ex-husband and leaving me to clean up your mess? You think that's keeping it together? You think that's what a wife does? You think that's what a daughter does?" I could see her cracking now, her face flushing, her jaw tightening, trying to hold on to whatever control she had left. You didn't what?" I cut her off again, unable to hold it back. "You didn't abandon Greg. You didn't drain our savings. You didn't let me believe that everything was fine while you and your mother played house." Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I never wanted this to happen. You don't know what it's been like for me, Daniel." I threw my hands up in frustration. "I don't know what it's been like. I've been living it. I've been the one stuck here, watching him wither away while you pretend everything's fine. And you have the nerve to tell me what it's been like for you?" Greg's weak voice broke through the tension. "She's right about one thing, Daniel." He turned his head slightly, eyes flicking over to Emily. "I've been a burden, but you've been her enabler. You let her do this to me." Greg's words hit like a slap. It wasn't the first time he'd pointed out my role in all this, but now it felt different, like a knife twisting. I glanced at him, then back at Emily. She was shaking her head, her face pale, eyes wide, realizing that everything had just come crashing down. "Stop this," Emily said quietly, almost pleading. "You're not being fair. You don't know everything." "I know enough," I said, cutting her off for the last time. "I know you've been lying. I know you've been manipulating me. And I know you've been neglecting your father. And I'm not going to let you get away with it anymore." Emily opened her mouth to argue, but she had nothing left. Greg's video footage of her asking him for money, the bank statements, everything we'd gathered, her face fell. She was cornered, and she knew it. Peter and Jane stood behind her, silent. They didn't speak up, didn't defend her. I could see them trying to process everything, the weight of their own guilt pressing down. I stood my ground, refusing to back down, even as a wave of sadness crashed over me. I wasn't doing this out of anger anymore. I was doing it because I couldn't let them keep hurting Greg, or me, any longer. "This isn't just about you, Emily," I said, voice softer now. "This is about all of us, and I'm not going to let you walk away from it anymore." I looked around at all of them, the family I had tried so hard to make mine, and saw nothing but shame. But it didn't matter anymore. They'd had their chance, and now it was time for them to face the truth. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy as everyone just stood there, processing the mess they'd stepped into. Emily's face was pale, her lips trembling as she tried to hold it together. She opened her mouth a few times, but nothing came out. Not a single word that could undo what we just laid out. I could see the cracks in her. The facade she'd so carefully built over the years was crumbling in front of her. Peter stood next to her, looking like he was trying to find something to say but couldn't. Jane, her mother, was silent too, her eyes darting nervously from me to Greg, like she wasn't sure who the enemy was anymore. I didn't say anything. I just watched them, feeling like I was watching an old house burn down, something that had been broken for so long, it was only a matter of time before it all went up in flames. A knock at the door broke the silence. I barely even flinched. Greg had arranged for Patricia, his lawyer, to show up and finalize everything. She was the only one who could make this real, make sure the will was executed, and Emily and her family were legally cut out for good. Patricia walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She was professional, calm, everything Emily wasn't. She took a quick glance at the scene, but didn't flinch. It was clear she had seen it all before. She walked straight to Greg's bedside, where he was propped up with pillows, pretending to be near death. She pulled out a set of documents, her eyes briefly meeting mine. She didn't have to say a word. I could tell what she was thinking. It was finally over. Patricia looked at the family, her tone clipped. "I'm here to finalize Greg's will and make sure the trust is transferred to Daniel as stipulated. Emily and her family will not be included in any of this." Emily's head jerked up at the mention of her name. "You can't do this!" she spat, her voice rising in disbelief. "You can't just cut us out." "I can," Patricia said, without missing a beat, sliding the papers over to me. "Everything is in order." Emily tried to step forward, but her mother grabbed her arm, holding her back, as if they both realized at that moment that there was no more ground to stand on. "You're making a huge mistake, Daniel," Emily said, her voice breaking. "Please, I'm sorry. We didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to understand." Her words hit me like a dull thud. I didn't care about the apology. I didn't care about any of it. They had used me, manipulated me, and now they were trying to act like the victims. I shook my head. "It's too late for that. You've had your chances." I looked over at Greg, who was watching the whole thing unfold, his expression unreadable. I could see the relief in his eyes. The last piece of this puzzle was finally falling into place. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a man who had been abandoned and forgotten. He looked like someone who had regained his dignity. "Let's get this done," I said, nodding to Patricia. She didn't hesitate. She handed me the papers, and with a quick signature, everything was official. I handed them back to her, and she took them with a small, satisfied smile. Emily, still in shock, didn't say anything else. She just stared at the papers, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. I could see it in her eyes. She knew she had lost. Everything she thought was hers had just slipped away, and there was nothing she could do about it. I turned to walk away, but not before one last look at Emily. "You've had plenty of time to make things right, but you didn't." I left without another word. The chaos was still there, hanging in the air behind me, but I didn't feel the need to stick around and watch it unfold. I didn't need to see Emily break down. She'd made her choices. As I stepped outside, I felt the weight of the last few days lift off my shoulders. The sun was setting, casting a golden light across the yard. The air felt different, cleaner, like I could breathe again. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally rebuild. This wasn't just about Greg or the money. It was about taking back control of my life, about not letting anyone, not Emily, not her family, keep me in a corner anymore. As I walked away from the house, I felt an unexpected peace settle in. It wasn't the victory I'd imagined. It wasn't about revenge. It was about doing the right thing, for me, for Greg, and for everyone who had been overlooked for far too long.